You know, you mentioned a lot of those barriers, barriers to access, explaining why we have these disparate impacts in communities. Um, I was having a conversation recently, and I was trying to help people understand why in some communities it's just not intuitive as to these barriers. So, for example, um, we talk about having access to pools and access to swim lessons, but some
Mhm.
families are in a space where they're worried about where their next meal is coming from.
Mhm.
They're worried about paying the rent for the month. And as a result, getting to that next stage, what they consider to be that next item around swimming is not the biggest priority. So some of it too is helping families meet their core needs so that
Mhm.
they can we can open the lens so they can see the criticality of swimming. So I'm just wondering, um, is that a space where Gabrielle's Wings is going deeper and seeing where those more basic needs of families are not being met? And is that why this family component is so important to this programming?
That's a great question. You know, certainly COVID has changed the lens for all of us, right? And I won't get it exactly right, but there's the old expression that if America catches a cold, Black America gets the flu.
Mm,
So think of that from a socioeconomic people of color standpoint and what's happened. You know, if America has a pandemic, what on earth are our children dealing with? Our children in communities who are disenfranchised, who don't have Wi-Fi, who don't have parents that can help them with at-home learning. So we, like many organizations, want to be agile and smart and pause over this
yeah.
last 18 months to say, how are we at our highest use? How has the need changed? How has the inflection point pivoted? And how can we meet it there? So certainly to your point, being inclusive, thinking of the 360 of a child's life. You know, I, as a 20 something, was involved with the Big Sisters program and had this amazing, brilliant young mentee. And I would, you know, take her out and took her to my beloved alma mater, Howard University, to see Black folks doing things and take her to the library. But you know what? I had to drop her back off in the most dangerous part of
Yeah.
Southeast DC,
Yeah.
surrounded by crack, surrounded in her house by people that said everything I was telling her was a lie,
Mm,
right? Not literally, but by what she saw.
mhm.
So that's where getting beyond the transactional and saying, how do you make generational changes?
Yes.
How do you make generational shifts? And, you know, there is that 1 in a million child that somehow figures out how to do it on their own without grandma or mama or a taxi. But the reality is, most of us need that support. Most of us need that access. Most of us need to see that support and need to see someone or something that looks like us. So, right now, Gabrielle's Wings is really focused on how do we, I don't want to say post pandemic because I don't know that that's um, the most informed way to put where we are right now. But at this
Mhm.
particular stage in this new evolving normal, how do we look at the greatest needs in the communities that were already facing gaps, and what can we do to build, not just triage, you know,
Right.
and it's hard, right, in this sort of work. We could have a whole conversation about how tough it is to be disciplined enough to not just put band-aids, but to think strategically, to think long term, to set goals, to set metrics so that you can hopefully make systemic changes,
Yes.
instead of putting a band-aid on today that helps today, but in 3 days it's going to fall off and you're going to be back where you were. So that I hope I'm answering your question, but that philosophically is where we're trying to stand back, as hard as it is from a heart standpoint, because you want to help everyone where they are right now. And if we're talking about systemic change, it is about that child, but it's about everyone in that child's life. And it is about how that child will be empowered to know how to fish and not just get a fish.
Yes. Yes. Now, you've definitely answered the question, especially the piece about, changing the narrative, breaking these what I would dare say is a generational curse. And I myself have been part of that, having not learned to swim as a child, and actually just over the last 2.5 years, having learned how to swim. So these things are important, and to meet community where they are.